Welcome to the weekly SKTLs volunteer/community call. Not sponsored by DuckTales, but ooh. But how's everybody doing? We I guess have a couple weeks of news and/or topics to talk about. I know in our SKTLs Slack channel, Dan posted a interesting controlled descent of rocket debris article, which I'm sure we can get into. But Cody, haven't seen you in a minute. Anything you'd like to start off with?
Let's hit on a couple of space news topics. I think that's great. Well, we're hitting, I'm Mr. Stocks, sort of. So I'll mention that Astra is going to do a 1-for-5 stock split to try to get their stock back over $1 in order to stay listed and not have to go pink sheets and over the counter bulletin boards. And so I shorted Astra at one point. I owned it initially, then I shorted it, and we rode it for a while. And it's a company that's had its problems. I would not short it nor buy it anymore. But most of the time, when a company does a reverse stock split, whether their name is Lucent or
usually
Astra,
doesn't end well.
What's that?
So it usually does not end well.
Does not end well. It usually, you can Blue Apron. I was actually somehow it came across a worst performers or best performers list the other day on my program, and I clicked on it. I was like, oh yeah, I was on Fox Business with the CEO of Blue Apron at the right when COVID was starting in 2019 or whatever year that was, and it was the bottom because Blue Apron blew up. Went the stock went up,
blew up Apron.
Every other crappy stock in that environment, especially if they had an at-home play on it. And the reason I bring this up is Blue Apron now, you can pull up a chart, maybe Cabana. It did a reverse split at some point a few months ago, and it's now 90% below where it did the reverse stock split. So it's a tough business to try to, when your stock is gone below $1, whether your name is Lucent or Astra, it's rare to really come back. I've seen it happen. BlackBerry went down to $1.80 or $2 or something at its bottom, and eventually was bought for 20 times that price by T-Mobile. No, Sprint.
Well, you'll excuse my terminology for a moment, if you will, but it's very apropos when describing reverse splits. But shit don't bounce. And again, apologies if I offended anybody, but
yeah, I'm totally offended.
But yeah, I resemble that remark. But this is what happens, and the market doesn't lie. And so when you see reverse splits, it's like, how many times can you divide by 0? And it becomes a real issue, because it tells you that management, frankly, is in panic mode, and they know what happens.
Savannah. ASTR. Sorry, Jan.
When you get yourself delisted, and the other old thing we used to say is, pink sheets are one shade away from red, and it's not a good place to be. It's not a good place to be. And so, yeah, you watch it, and you watch it. you don't. I wouldn't be going anywhere near it. Oh, but how much lower can it go? Zero is always the 100% on that train.
It can go 100% lower than this price. Yeah. And what's remarkable is, Lucent did a reverse stock split many years ago, and the stock never came back, and then it was taken private, I guess, right? Sanatsi,
It was purchased by, was it Nortel? Some another company.
Yeah, I think it was Nortel.
Nortel bought them.
I think it was Nortel.
So GE is the same thing, right? Same way. They did a reverse split, and they haven't recovered.
Citigroup did a reverse stock split.
Going down.
Yeah. Interesting. Cabana, you froze.
I did?
Yeah.
Yes.
other than your.
You have that. You have that wistful look in your eye, though.
Yeah, you do. You look like you're really enjoying this conference call. You're like, wow, this is fascinating stuff.
What the heck?
Oh,
I look live
wonder.
here. But...
Oh yeah, well, you don't look real live here. You look frozen live.
Pixelated frozen. There you are.
Fresh frozen.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, while we were looking at charts, Cody, just one more. Do you care to look at Planet Labs and just talk us through their recent earnings real quick?
Yeah, they took revenue estimates for this year down from the growth from 35% top line growth for this year to 20% top line growth. The company, like Black Sky, is a competitor to them, has not exactly an overlap of customers, but the same kind of government, mostly governmental and some corporate customers that use their, both companies do like real-time satellite imagery. And if you ever heard of Maxar, it's like Maxar 2.0.
And Black Sky's been getting some nice government contracts and support just recently too.
So their Black Sky's quarter was fine, and they kept estimates at the same. Planet took estimates, took guidance lower, and market, like it needs to turn, like it's got to do some like real growth to turn cash flow positive at some point. And the good news about these business models for these companies that put satellites into the sky and then sell services on them is it's a sunk cost up front that, and you have to replenish your satellites. So it's an ongoing cost, but most of the costs happen up front. And then if you can grow the services and grow the customer base of those services, it's a very high margin additional incremental dollar that you generate in sales. And so that's the promise of this stuff. We sold our Planet for just about break even here on your chart. You can see where we started buying it, where it's now trading. But we bought it, wrote it up, and ended up doing a round trip. I still own some Black Sky that we bought recently around $1.20, $1.30, as Trading with Cody subscribers know. Rocket Lab, of course, as we've discussed on these calls, ad nauseum, perhaps for some people. I don't know that I'll ever get sick of talking about space stuff, but Rocket Lab, RKLB or BSKY is what you're looking for. Just go to Rocket Lab. There's Black Sky. Rocket Lab's probably the single best performing space SPAC that came out in the last 3 or 4 years. Stock has really had a nice move off the bottom. Full disclosure, we did trim a little bit yesterday after this big pop, but we were very aggressively buying Rocket Lab more than any other space stock not named SpaceX, which you can only do in the private markets. The average consumer is not going to be able to do that. But anyway, still like the Rocket Lab, and it's still a big position, but discipline dictates taking a little off.
This is a sector now more than ever for very patient investors who can, if they can identify quality, buy it. Quality is going to be a suspect word in this sector for a while, simply because when you get, guidance that's downward, just remember that's what it is, guidance. That's a polite way of saying we know where it's going and we're trying to make it easier on you to hear the news. But I've never seen guidance that I frankly believed was overly aggressive guidance to the downside. To the upside, sure. But I think the cushioning of downside guidance is something to be aware of. And it really just means we're not going to hit our numbers. We're hoping that we do better than we think we will. We're not going to pull a fire alarm, but the trend is not your friend when things are going in a southerly direction. And I think what's going to happen is a lot of these companies are going to have to scrape bottom. They're going to have to really get bruised up a little bit before they can turn upward. And I think that, it's going to be people who can say yes, but the fundamentals of the business haven't changed. They're still good. They still have good technology. They still have a good pipeline. That's going to be what separates on the way up. And You know, we've talked about it before. Those who have government contracts, those who are continuing to work with DOD, those monies are flowing, and they're flowing as much as they've ever flowed. And so those who are almost all in on commercial, it's going to be a tougher slug, and you have to just make sure you understand that and are willing to accept that. The flip side is that, you know, today Deloitte came out with a great new report. Their space tech report. They did one in January where they focused on Europe. This one's focused on the US, and they're very bullish looking forward about the sector. And yet, you know, they're saying, hey, it's going to be a while. And the you know, satellite communications is the one thing that they focused on as being the heaviest growth area, because it's going to be all about communications infrastructure. No matter what happens in space, it's all going to be about communications. So, you know, you can go to their site. You can find it by looking around. There's a great article in Space News as well. And as part of that, Deloitte issued another call, as we've heard from many institutions, consultants, universities. Every company needs to have a space strategy ASAP. And so if you can get your eyes up off the ground in front of you watching this market and look at the horizon, it's very bright. I have no doubts it's going to
really resemble that, Mark. Hey, let's hit a few other news items real quick. We've got Varda Space launched a biotech laboratory to eventually try to make drugs in outer space. Again, the idea of making drugs or semiconductors or anything that needs a really clean, no dust environment, those things will make sense in outer space as the cost to get back and forth from outer space continue to drop. Rocket Lab made the satellite thing that they sent up, that Varda sent up. It actually went up, not in a Rocket Lab ship, but in a SpaceX Falcon 9. Much to the chagrin of Bryce, who's not on the call with us, at least right now. I think he's watching, but he was annoyed that Rocket Lab did not get the launch on that. But, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe it was too big for the Rocket Lab rocket, the size of the satellite they built. I'm not sure. But anyway, Varda did do that. Axiom Space returned their astronauts from the International Space Station. The second time that Axiom Space has taken astronauts to the International Space Station. As Axiom is going to inherit the International Space Station in 2029, 2030.
Part of
it. Bought it from NASA, the rights to the International Space Station when NASA retires it. And theoretically, NASA should have a new space station or 5 up there within 10 years anyway.
2030 is the latest push out date for a couple of the private companies that NASA gave the money to do it, like Voyager and was it Blue
Origin
that are building these stations. So,
Dan, not everybody watching just knows what Blue is reference to. Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company. I used to do TV. We always had to throw, our producers make us throw $1 in our show was in a bar. Had to throw $1 in the glass jar on the bar anytime we used like an acronym.
Industry jargon. Yeah.
Any jargon was $1. Yes. So that was $1, Dan.
Okay.
Speaking of dollars, let's hit on crypto real quick too. Current SEC fear. Wait, what I don't understand, this is sometimes I feel like I'm on another planet. Like the crypto world is freaking out because they say the SEC is cracking down on them. And I'm like, number one, this ain't no crackdown. Number two, you've years coming. And number three, what Coinbase and Binance and these other exchanges have done with in many ways, including just listing securities and allowing people to trade cryptocurrencies, which are securities, 99.99% of them, almost every single one not named Bitcoin or SKTLs, had founders tokens or benefits or some sort of transfer of wealth, which makes them a security. And once they go once they're just because they're no longer, even if the founders aren't selling their tokens, if there were founders tokens, it's still a security. And all of this stuff is illegal. Selling and enabling people to buy and sell securities on an exchange that's not registered with the SEC is illegal. So I don't know why, number one, we're surprised that and number one, it's not a crackdown. They're throwing around some subpoenas and some court appearances. Like when the CEO of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong, if and when he ever gets cuffed, then I'll call it a crackdown. But what they're doing now is Coinbase is still worth $12 billion. Full disclosure, I own some puts on Coinbase right now. It's not a statement on this itself. I think their business model's tough anyway. The margins, what they're charging 3, 4, 5% to buy and sell these cryptocurrencies is not going to sustain anyway. But I think it's a troubled business anyway. But the SEC should crack down on Binance, should crack down on Coinbase, and it should crack down on 99.999. It should suspend all trading of about 99.999% of the cryptos on the planet.
Well, how did Coinbase get approved for its IPO?
That has nothing to do.
I'm serious.
Company, you can have a fraudulent business model, but all the SEC does when they approve an IPO is they say, look, what you've written in these documents, as far as we can tell, is legal, is true. That's all they're just saying what you've written in these documents is true. That doesn't have anything
everything
to do
was already
with whether or
traded
not
on there
the
before
SEC
they
is
even
gonna come back and crack down on you for doing something illegal that you mentioned in your documents.
There's the reality, but I think Cabana makes a good point in that while it may have been legal, the SEC has a history of talking out of both sides of its mouth when it comes to things that it doesn't want to take a position on, where it has no opinion. And so they'll say, yeah, that's fine. You can, to your point, Cody, you can list your company. Now, as to whether or not the business you're going to do violates the other side of the house, well, we'll deal with that later. And they kind of invited them into it. But keep in mind that almost all of the people who have created crypto in the past, especially going back to, many of them had zero understanding of securities markets, zero understanding of regulations, and they came at it from a different place. And I talked to several people who were trying to get me to help them when they were setting up some of these new cryptos, because they didn't know anything about the securities business. They didn't know. They were talking to SEC lawyers, not from the SEC, but securities and exchange lawyers at different big firms who were just trying to make a buck and say, we'll walk you through the process. So they shouldn't be allowed to trade. They are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And, they shouldn't have been allowed to do an IPO, frankly, because of the business they were going to conduct. The SEC has to look at the underlying business. It's just an example of the SEC not getting it.
I think you guys both have a good point on that. Yeah, like the SEC shouldn't have allowed this company to go public at all if they were going to later come back and charge them with criminal listing of security coins.
Yeah.
But and literally in the document it says, hey, we're going to criminally allow people to trade coins. And they're like, yeah, well, at least they're being honest about what they're going to do. I get your point. I'd like to show you something though on that note. This is where it gets
you ready?
SEC right here. It literally says the SEC, all it's doing when it allows a company to go public, it is saying that it is compliant with the going public process, is compliant with the securities laws. What the Coinbase is, you can take me off sharing again. Coinbase is now taking it a step further where they are basically using the SEC's allowing them to go public as like some sort of halo and like blessing for the company's business practices.
Right.
And it literally on the front of their prospectus for the IPO, just like it is on the front of every company's prospectus on an IPO, in all caps, it says, just because the SEC is approving this company coming public, it does not approve and if that their business model or the practices that they are doing. And furthermore, any pretension of this at all, if you pretend that the SEC has approved your business model when you go public because they approved your prospectus of going public, it's a criminal activity. You cannot pretend that the SEC approved your business because they approved your IPO.
Yeah, it's SEC CYA is what that all is, and so sure they go through all of the disclaiming so that no one can go back on them, but they're more than able to go after everybody.
But see, this is where I feel like I'm on a different. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm defending the SEC. Anybody who's read me or watched me on TV for 20 years knows that I'm like, the SEC drives me bonkers because they don't do shit until everything's crashed, and then they show up and like, yeah, we're here to be the rescue. I predicted this 5 years ago. Like I was like, yeah, the SEC ain't gonna do shit until, excuse my French now, Dan, you opened a can of worms. They're not gonna do shit until everything goes to zero, and then they show up and they're like, yeah, we're here to save investors. Man, I'm defending the SEC. I don't want to defend the SEC. I'm mad at the SEC too. I do not like the SEC. I don't like Gensler. I don't like any of it.
Do you know who wrote the anti-manipulative acts of the SEC when it was formed?
Probably Joe Kennedy.
No, Joe Kennedy was the first SEC commissioner, the great bootlegger himself, but
the great criminal.
He was a genius. He brought in, along with himself, J. Paul Getty, Charlie Merrill, Edward Hutton, and two others. They sat in a bar in Lower Manhattan and on a yellow pad wrote the anti-manipulative acts because, in their own words, who better than they to know how to manipulate the markets? So therefore, they should be the best at writing the rules to keep people from manipulating the markets. And that's what happened.
All day, every day, Bryce and I look for one of the hundreds of publicly traded companies valued in hundreds of millions to tens of billions of dollars who are what? Fraudulently doing crappy stuff to the public's money. And it still happens. And I don't care how big the bylaws are. After they passed Frank Dodd, I was on the Tonight Show. I was the Wall Street correspondent for the Tonight Show at the time. And I did this whole skit where I went around to attorneys on Wall Street attorneys. And we'd sit down in those high-end, high-rise, beautiful penthouse offices of theirs overlooking the Statue of Liberty. And I'd be like, so you think the Dodd-Frank is going to fix the banking industry so they can't do the bad stuff anymore? And they'd be like, oh yeah. And I'd be like, here's the Dodd-Frank bill. Can you point out in here what page that part is? Where's that part that fixes it? It'd be great. The SEC, Dodd-Frank, the Republican Democrat regime, these are the reasons why all roads lead back to Bitcoin anyway. This is why we do crypto. Because it's all corrupt and all stupid, and none of them actually help. And I'm defending the SEC.
It all comes full circle.
Thank you. Cabana, have I upset you? You've disappeared now.
No, I'm just behind my avatar because I guess evidently my signal sucks. So,
okay. All right. It's not personal then.
In fact, you were just
no, not at all. I mean, we can disagree. And
personal.
what's the point of crypto if banks and regulations and all it like the SEC governs it by what's it called? Regulation by enforcement. So crypto was created like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a legit crypto. Would you say that is true?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin and SKTLs are the only tokens that were issued to the public entirely. There were no founder tokens. There was no transfer of value to the creators. Every other token, the creators got rich or tried to get rich.
Yeah, and the reality is, as you well know, in the financial world, nobody creates any products without a profit motivation for themselves. So there is nothing charitable going on anywhere near Wall Street or Washington. So it shouldn't be surprising. And
I mean, companies go public to make money, and people have, insiders have all the allotments of stock that, they want. So it's like you said.
It's a good book. I bet Dan has read this book. Bryce has it on his desk at his house.
Sure.
As I found out the other day. He's got a third of the way through it, that I think. But if you haven't read this book, it's not the Adam Smith of the Invisible Hand guy. This is a what do you call a fake name? What do you call that? Pseudonym. And even just the first page, when you open this book, past the preface, it starts off with, the world is not the way they tell you it is. Unconsciously, we know this because we have all been immunized by growing up in the United States. The little girl watching television asks if she will really get the part in the spring play if she uses Listerine. And her good mother says, no, darling, that is just a commercial. And then it talks about the Easter bunny. We're all lied to all the time. Nothing's changed. It is a game. The money is a game. Bitcoin doesn't have, at least you have set rules forever. Everything else is a fiat game that people control.
There are now plenty of people in this country that are trying to make everybody miserable every day so that we don't have these wonderful views of the future any longer. We're all going to be miserable. Hey, say what you want. I'll still take this place over any other place on the planet. So, you just have to spend time outside the country to realize that.
This time and place for all of our problems with the SEC and the Republican Democrat regime and the wealth gap, and it sucks, man. That I don't want to take away Jeff Bezos's yacht and stuff, right? I also don't want poor kids hungry. And there's got to be some better, there's got to, it sucks. There's a lot of stuff that sucks in the United States. We're bombing children in the Middle East with profits from Google and Apple. This stuff sucks. But at the same time, it is the greatest time and place to be alive here in this country with the opportunities we've got, the wealth that gets created, the work that you can do, the freedoms you have. It can be both. We can have opposing thoughts in one head, right?
Talk to people. Don't watch television, and it's amazing what'll happen because we're just spoon-fed garbage and an agenda 24/7. That's all. We're spoon-fed it because a miserable populace is a controllable populace, and you can look at other countries and see it as plain as day. We tend to think, oh, that couldn't happen here, but I think the last 5 or 10 years should prove to everybody that everything you've ever heard about, quote, third world, countries with all these horrible politics, it can happen here, and it is as we sit here. So
it's a miracle.
Just eyes wide open. That's all.
It's a miracle that our country exists.
And we'll
Bryce
fix
and I talk about it all the time. The fact
we'll fix it.
These guys who got together and started a country and could have empowered themselves with anything, could have created their own kingdom. They were like, you know what we'll do? We're not going to let ourselves do shit. Yeah. We're going to control the government, not the people. And that is a miraculous thing that actually happened.
But now, of course,
still at least give space and words towards listening to the documents that they used to found our country, even though from fake fill-outs to the SEC to the income tax manipulation loophole shit that everybody uses at the IRS, none of that should be constitutional. We are bombing children in the Middle East. I don't think that's in the Constitution.
But, there are people who would have you believe that all those great founding fathers were all evil. The people who are rewriting history are the ones that bother me the most, as if rewriting history is going to suddenly make history not there anymore, that it's not going to be something that we've learned from. And that's the issue I have. Truth doesn't matter anymore, and there's no journalism anymore. That's the problem.
We're doing journalism right now. This is it. This is journalism. This is as good as it gets, man.
It's trading
Put
with
this
Cody.
in a podcast form and get it out to the world.
I'm going to start a Dear Cody column. That's
Dear
right.
Cody. You guys want to talk about the government? Holler at me. All right. Last questions or comments, Sanatzi?
Wait. Yes. I believe it was the March issue of the Atlantic magazine. One of the articles was we are already living in metaverse. So I'm going to find the link, online link to it, and I'll post it on our Slack channel. And pretty much covers what we've been talking about in the last 6 minutes or so. The other thing that I wanted to, two things I want to touch base is we did calculate the monthly reward, and Daniel is going to mint for us 95,000 Skytles. The 70,000 of the tokens are for 7 astronauts, and then the remaining 25,000 is for 250 satellites. So total of 95,000. And Daniel, should mint them and also post it on our Slack channel so that we can vote on it.
Well, and we'll put it on Twitter too, of course.
Yes.
Everybody watching, if you don't follow us on Twitter, follow us on Twitter. SKTLs.
Yeah, I was Piper and I talked about it when we compared notes on Monday for the reward calculation, and he pointed out that I forgot the name of the young guy we had months ago. He used to do the Telegram, right? He used to post our monthly rewards in different platforms. So we need to. Cody definitely does it on Twitter, and I can do it on Discord. I haven't been on Discord, Skytle. So once we calculate it, and also Daniel posts it, and so it shouldn't be a problem. But if he forgets it, I'll post it in our Slack channel as well. So I don't know who can do the Telegram posting.
Joe Anderson.
Does Joe?
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Joe. Can you do the Telegram?
I can work on it. I can help. Yeah, for sure. I don't know what my camera's doing. It's not working for some reason. So
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, Sanatzi, I'll work with you, and I can start doing that. I can figure it out.
Thanks, man.
Basically,
the link is on SKTLS.com on the homepage. Right when you get there, if you'll just go there, and just join that room and start letting people and just engage with them too, Joe, please.
Yeah, you can pretty much look at our Slack channel once Daniel or I post it. You can basically copy and paste the same message. It would be just fine if you paste it in the Telegram account.
We're going to have to mint a lot more Skytles too, because as today's estimate now is another 36,000 satellites will be launched into low Earth orbit alone by 2030.
How many thousand?
36,000 more satellites into
Wow.
Leo.
So right now we're looking at over 4,000, right? Currently,
yeah. In Leo, 4,000.
Yeah. And also
7,000 total operating. But
also, I wanted to mention the link that Dan posted in our Slack channel, because I don't know if it was what was his name, Jeff mentioned. I don't know if Jeff mentioned it or some other speaker, basically using parachute descent for space to be cleaning. Well, so it is a success. Immediately caught my eye as soon as you posted it.
Yeah, that part of me looks at that and says, I don't know how successful it was, other than it didn't land on somebody's house. But I think it just goes to show the difference, the reality of the difference in technology to where that's a government rocket. That's one of their premier ones. It's not some small private company because they don't have private companies, but the notion of having to land something that big
Exactly.
with a parachute and not being able to land it standing up and reuse it. So they said they're going to recycle it. You can't do that in a country where there's a large population density, and as many people as there are there, they're pretty well spread out in most places. And if they ever did land one erroneously, we'd never hear about it if they landed it on a population base. So I think it's great that they're doing that, but frankly, they also destroyed satellites to create debris. So
Dan, I just have to issue with one correction. The U.S. government does have companies. They're called Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan.
I was speaking about China.
China does have companies. They're called every company that trades publicly anywhere that's based in China.
China.
All right, guys. Okay. Peace, love, and happiness. Now that we've said all the things we shouldn't say, I hope those government agencies that are watching aren't too mad at us.
The men in black will be showing up shortly, Cody. So
the social media industrial complex. Get me.
The social media complex. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, I have a social media complex. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. And we'll show. I know we still got to show people how to buy the token. I forgot.
Yes. You keep threatening to do that.
Wasn't here last week, so it's his fault. And then this week, I totally forgot until this moment. So I'll do it next week. Still Cabana's
See you
fault.
then.
Both weeks is Cabana's fault.
Be safe out there.
Till then.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Bye, guys.
Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
for being here.